Okay, we're back again. Third day in the third round of going through various builds. Today I figured I'd cover the Templar. And so I'm going to be going through and showcasing essentially what I've got set up for the Templar for a... actually there's slight variations. There's 2 tank builds, and then there's a Magicka and a Stamina for the Templar. Templar has actually been one of my favorite classes from the get-go. Especially, well, I guess both Templar and Magplar. Stamina and Magicka versions. Just a very versatile class. Good for all around. They've got a decent amount of utility in their kit for across the board, whether it's healing or damage or tanking. They're not spec'd quite as good for tanking by default. They when the game initially released, there was a little more certain classes were better at certain roles than others. I don't think the Templar was initially released necessarily with tanking in mind. Again, it's always been play as you want, but certain classes have better options available within their class kit. The Templar is a good, just kind of a good compromise across the board, though. Excuse me. And one of the biggest benefits of Templar specifically is their main spammable, whether you're Magicka or Stamina from a damage standpoint. Puncturing Sweep and the Stamina version, Biting Jabs, are both very good spammables. So that's one advantage that Templars have. Excuse me. Compared to other classes. Not every class has great spammables, I guess you could say. So Templars have that going for them. I would say probably the one downside traditionally that Templars have had, along with Necros when they came out, is that they don't have access to direct access within their kit to Major Brutality, Major Sorcery. However, I believe it was just in the last DLC that came out, they've now updated to where, at least for the Stamina morph, you don't get anything for the Magicka, but for the Stamina morph, Biting Jabs now actually gives you Major Brutality and Major Sorcery. If you're doing a full hybrid build, that can be handy, but essentially for Stamplars now, you have access to Major Brutality, which is a very, very nice benefit. It's been years waiting for some source within their kit for Brutality and Sorcery, but it doesn't do any good for the Magicka side of the house, unless you want to run jabs, but no one's going to run jabs on a Magicka centered build just because you're spammable. So, but at least from a Templar standpoint, you now have access to that. And I'll get into that when I actually get over to the Stamina build. I'm not even sure if I've updated it over here, to be honest. If not, I'll actually update it while we're going through the build. But for now, I figured I'd start with the Magicka build. This is, I believe this was another class that I had fairly early on. So the Magicka build in this case is actually more centered around soloing and leveling. This being my third account, I was, with the first few characters that I got leveled, it was more about leveling CP, and so some of their builds are set up more for soloing content than anything else, so that I could not necessarily grind in a hardcore sense, but just generally grind going through quests, whatever it may be. It was designed for solo content, so that's what this build reflects. For the Magicka side, I'm running Ma the Infernal. That's kind of a fun factor for those of you that run this having a Daedroth spawn, breathing fire on things, stomping around is fun. And the damage output from this is quite decent. May not be top tier, but it's decent enough that it's worth running this. And again, for the fun factor, it's a fun thing to have. And it's easy to proc, deal damage with a light or heavy attack. 33% chance is pretty high, so he's up a lot. Tanks love him. So Palinals is a reflection of the soloing aspect of this build. Palinals, I went over this in the one of the previous videos, I believe it was for the Dragon Knight, is also currently running Palinals. Palinals was originally a hybrid set. It was completely reworked during sometime in the last year, maybe a little bit more. In recent times, they reworked this to be a completely different set now with completely different bonuses. And this is a great set if you're someone who likes to solo content a lot. This is a fantastic set to use, especially on something like a Magplar, because the benefits that this brings with the damage and the penetration, you're getting a damage shield, which helps obviously reduce the amount of damage you're taking, but you're gaining stackable weapon and spell damage as this goes, the more things you kill. The downside to it is you're taking damage relative to the amount of stacks that you have as well. So you need something when you're running this. It's a great solo set, but you need some way to offset the damage that's coming in. And so having something like Ring of the Pale Order, or in the case of Magplar, their main spammable is healing based on damage done. So the more this damage amps up from Palinals, the more healing you're getting back from your main spammable. So this is a great set to run solo on a Magplar. And then the second set I've got on this is Burning Spellweave. Burning Spellweave is another one that with a hybridization, it's seen some use on the stamina side as well, because it's just a really nice solid boost to your weapon and spell damage. But traditionally this has just been a great set overall for Magicka builds. If you've got access to some flame damage, I wouldn't even say it requires a huge amount of flame damage to proc this. But this is a very solid set. Comes from City of Ash 1 or 2. It'll drop in there. The armor pieces usually are fairly easy to pick up. I know historically the staff has been much more difficult to procure for a lot of people. I don't know if it was just a bad RNG or the loot tables were weird, but I know for many, many years some people spent trying to find the Burning Spellweave flame destruction staff. So in this case, I'm not actually running that. I'm running Palinals on the front, because generally speaking, Maelstrom on the back infused with a weapon damage enchant. This is a fairly standard setup for mag builds, but I'm not on the back bar so long that I lose the stacks. If you look here within Palinals, they last for 10 seconds. So as long as you're proccing it again within 10 seconds, it's easy to keep these stacks up. So there's no reason that we can't just have it on the front bar. And that allows us to run Maelstrom or some other weapon of your choice on the back bar. I went with Maelstrom because this is good damage output from light and heavy attacks. So Burning Spellweave, running spell damage across all three. Arcane, nothing fancy. I don't tend to, in my builds, I don't tend to transmute jewelry all that often. Every once in a while I'll make something infused, but I know the top tier guys, a lot of times it's going either infused or all I can think of is Berserker now. That's not the right one. The one that basically amps up the damage done when they're below 25% health. So it's like a built-in execute basically, and that's popular for some of the people. But I don't tend to do that just because, again, most of my content I'm running solo or on my own. So Transmute Stones are harder to come by. Not difficult. I can run random normals or whatever, but they're I tend to reserve them a little more than just transmute anything and everything. So jewelry is one of those things that I generally leave alone, and I kind of work around whatever the existing trait is on it. So nothing too complex. This is... Pounce is just going to be activated simply by going and doing damage, and then that damage being flame damage. Whenever it's flame damage, it will proc the burning Spellweave as well. So, fairly straightforward setup. Food and Mundus on this setup right now is going to be set up. You see I have the Serpent and Bewitched. You can ignore that though. This build that you're looking at now is the Magicka build. However, this character, generally speaking, I've been running as a tank. So this is actually left over from the tank. Hopefully they will switch the, or add in the ability to modify your Mundus Stone at least. Maybe if we get really lucky, food will be part of that as well. That gets modified and updated when you switch builds with the Armory Station or the Armory Assistant. But for right now, we still don't have that capability. So when you switch builds, if you need to check your Mundus Stone and your food, because it may or may not correlate with whatever the new build is that you're switching to. It's something to be aware of. So normally on this type of setup, depending on the food, I do typically on my stamina builds, I normally incorporate lava foot, and then on the mag builds, let's see if she's got it in her view menu. Actually, yes, she does. So Ghastly Eyeball would be the normal food that I would run with this. I like the lava foot soup and salt rice and the Ghastly Eyeball. They're basically the same thing. One's for Magicka, one's for stamina. Because they bring a lot of recovery to the table. So here's the lava foot, and it's 493, and Ghastly is 459. So they both have really solid recovery options, which I tend to sit higher on my recoveries. I like a little extra in that sustain department than maybe some of the other builds, definitely way more than most of the builds you'll see for trials. That's another thing to be aware of. When you see people parsing on trial dummies and getting really high numbers, when you see people running really low recoveries, like I'm sitting at 700 magic recovery, and that's fine. More than enough. If you're running vet trials with organized groups, that may be more than enough, because you're going to be fed a lot of those resources. However, if you're running pickup groups for 4-man content, or you're out soloing, that's not going to be anywhere near enough. So I work the builds around the food. Generally speaking, nowadays I like to have at least somewhere in the department of like 1500 or so for whatever my recovery is. For stam builds, it'd be stam recovery. Mag builds would be mag recovery. I like 1500 to 2000, somewhere in that range. It depends on the class and what they have access to as far as sustain options. So you can play with it to a degree, but that's just my personal preference. And I'm not positive, but I'm guessing I was probably, depending on where I was with the mag recovery, at 668 is pretty low on this build. So my guess is that she was probably running the Atronac for the Mundus Stone. You can see stam recovery is 419. I believe they're the same levels, so it would be 419 additional mag recovery for the Atronac Mundus Stone, and then your food is going to augment that further. CP is kind of up in the air. If I was using this for a solo build, it may vary. It looks like I've got flanking here, which for a solo build is an odd choice, because it's typically more difficult to get into a flanking position if you're soloing, unless you have a companion who's tanking or something to that effect. So normally I would recommend taking this instead of this because you're going to be doing decent amount of crit damage and crit healing. This is a nice bonus to have if you're in 4-man groups where the tank is taunting and you have like a bear pet on a warden, or a companion who's tanking someone who's taking the mobs and the boss that aggro off of you, and that way you can get into better position behind the enemy. Then this is a good one to take. So Deadly Aim is single target, Thaumaturge is damage over time, and then Master at Arms is direct damage attacks. Honestly, I don't think I would put too much stock into this because I haven't run this build for quite a while. So this is just me sharing what I've run in the past, I guess, for this particular one. This is going to give you more health, reduced cost if you're under the effect of a status effect, better recovery if you have a negative effect on you from this one, and then the corresponding for mag builds, I will take Siphoning Spells. For stamina builds, Bloody Renewal. These are essentially the same thing. One's for Magicka, one's for stamina. This is a good method for sustain as well. If you're going through, especially if you're soloing or you're grinding through a lot of mobs, this will help with the sustain a lot. Skill-wise, nothing too fancy. Like I said, Mag still doesn't have access to major sorcery, so I'm using Degeneration for that in this case. Inner Light is something I typically run on Mag builds. I think the crit and the extra Magicka that you get as a bonus from this is worth it. The main spammable Puncturing Sweep is a great spammable. It's cleave damage, so you're getting an AoE, hitting multiple mobs in front of you, as well as healing you for the amount of damage that it's doing. Reflective Light, I typically take this one because it's multi-target. This also gives you access to Major Prophecy. So technically this and this are redundant, because Major Prophecy is active all the time passively here, so this isn't something that you typically would need. This is just something, in looking through here, Dawn's Wrath, I would actually probably recommend replacing this with something else, just because it's redundant with what's here. It does do flame damage, that may be why I have it equipped. Even though it's redundant, it's doing flame damage on multiple enemies. So this may be here specifically to proc the Burning Spellweave. Purifying Light, this is a great skill, and the stamina morph of this is also equally good. Highly recommend this for single target, for boss fights especially. This can wind up a decent amount of damage. And in the case of the Magicka one, it's actually leaving a pool on the ground that will heal whoever's standing in it. So that's a nice benefit, especially again for boss fights. It'll help the tank or whoever is close to the boss. Shooting Star, decent ultimate. The cost is kind of in that mid-range. This will hit in an AoE. It'll stun the targets. It's again doing flame damage, and it's generating ultimate. So if you can time it right, and you have a number of mobs in the area, this can actually give you a decent amount of ultimate back, which then of course helps you to recast it more quickly. So I do like this this morph. It's also again doing flame damage, so it's just another source for proccing Burning Spellweave. This as well as these two, these are all Mages Guild skills as well. So you're getting additional passive benefits from having those two things, or three things equipped. Let's see, increases max Magicka and Magicka recovery 2% for each ability slotted. So we're gaining a 6% bonus to max Magicka as well as recovery on the front bar from having all three of these here as well. So that's another nice bonus. Back bar is more for buffs. So Channeled Focus, again, both morphs. You've got a stamina morph for this as well. This is a fantastic skill. Wouldn't run a Templar without it. Stamina or Magicka, whichever morph is appropriate. This is just an all-around great skill. It's giving you your resistances. It's giving you sustain with either Magicka or stamina back. And this is now healing you as well. So this was sometime in the last year or so, this was another change that they made to Templars, where this is now a health-based heal. So Templar tanks now have a really nice option, similar to other classes, where they can get healing based on their maximum health. So this is just an overall great skill to have, and super cheap too. So Unstable Wall of Fire, this is coming from your Destro staff. This is again another source of flame damage on the back bar, plus this particular skill is activating that Maelstrom bonus that you're getting with the increased damage from light and heavy attacks while they're in your Wall of Elements. So this is definitely something you want to put down and keep down at all times as part of your rotation, because it's potentially proccing the Burning Spellweave as well as amplifying your overall damage. So this is very beneficial. Elemental Drain, this is applying minor Magicka steel. So this is another source in terms of sustain. This will definitely help with that. And this is also applying Major Breach. It's free to cast. So the Major Breach will amplify your damage as well, and it's helping with your sustain. Ritual of Retribution. This is going to remove 2 harmful effects as well as do damage to any enemies that are in the area, and this is actually quite a large area at the 12 meters. So this is just a nice thing to have. The fact that it removes harmful effects, so it's a cleanse, is also a very nice benefit. Repentance is another one of those that's free to cast. It's going to be based on the number of dead bodies, corpses around you. This passively will give you your minor fortitude, endurance, and intellect, which is a nice bonus. But ultimately, this is designed to give health to the group, you and the group, as well as restoring stamina to you. This is a fantastic skill. Can't emphasize that enough. Repentance, if you're going anywhere where there are mobs and you're going to be clearing through for soloing or 4-man content or trials, virtually anywhere where there are bodies, this is a great skill. And definitely recommend keeping it on your bar. And the back bar ultimate we have is Solar Prison. This is, depending on circumstance, you can use Shooting Star, or you can use Solar Prison. Either one of these are decent ultimates. This is more of a defensive, since it's applying Major Maim, and it is doing some magic damage with the synergy, but ultimately this is more about defensive, and this is more about offensive. But either one works, and they both bring some nice benefits to the table. I think that's about it. It's pretty straightforward setup. There's a decent amount of skills in here that will help to proc the Burning Spellweave, so that's up a good portion of the time, which really helps to amplify the damage. And I believe this is based on... that's light and heavy attacks. The Daedroth does flame damage as well. I know they've made changes over the years where procs can't proc other things, so I'm not sure off the top of my head if the flame damage from the Daedroth will proc Burning Spellweave. But off the top of my head, I'm guessing it might. But you have other sources as well that you can use, so. So that is the Magicka build. Nothing too fancy. Certainly works well for soloing. Switch over to stamina. I guess technically I don't even have to apply them. I can just kind of run through and show you here what's set up. Due to recent changes, They've done some buffing over the last year or so. Stormfist is now one of the top monster helms in the game in terms of damage. So this seems like a no-brainer. It's got a fun effect as well. Not really in the theme of Templar necessarily, but the damage output from Stormfist is quite good. And the additional stam recovery for that one piece, actually, for me, who likes having a little more recovery than maybe other builds, this it's a double benefit. So that's the helm. New Moon, no surprise there. I like New Moon as a base set for a lot of my builds. So infused and divines. Normally I have traditionally done infused on big pieces, divines on small. There have been a few times when I've done divines all the way around. That's gone back and forth. It's really, really close now, based on the mathematics as far as which one's better. So I think that just kind of comes down to personal preference. But generally speaking, I'm doing infused on the big pieces and divines on small. I've combined New Moon in this case with Zogvin. Zogvin I tried on a couple other classes. I know it's got a good reputation, but for my playstyle, I did not find it as effective on some of the other classes. But when I tried it on Templar specifically, and I believe this is a result of the fact that the spammable is hitting so many times in succession, as well as the burning light, I believe is another portion of that. So there are a number of times that you can potentially crit with your spammable. And I found Zogvins to be fantastic, just a great set to run specifically on Templar for that reason, because your chance of critting goes up, not based on your actual critical chance, but just based on the fact that your spammable is hitting multiple times within that 1 second window. So each time has a potential to crit. So this is up and easy, very, very easy to keep up. Whereas on other classes, it may be, if your crit is lower, this is not necessarily the best choice. So, in this particular case, see, I've got Zogvin jewelry, all robust. Again, I don't do a lot of transmutation on jewelry. I usually take whatever trait it is and I'll work around it. I know a lot of people will take healthy sets, for example, and because they don't want to run heavy pieces on the body, they'll get jewelry and weapons, and then they'll transmute the healthy attribute of the jewelry to robust or infused, something to that effect. Generally speaking, I don't even mind having a little extra health. It's just beneficial for running the content that I run. So even with healthy jewelry, typically I will just work around that, and I will allocate points accordingly, either through enchants on the armor or through the attributes, wherever it may be. So Zogvin jewelry in this case, I've got looks like a couple pieces on the body, 3 pieces of New Moon, New Moon dagger, precise and Nirnhoned with poison and stam return, so this is helping my sustain on the front bar, and then Maelstrom infused bow with a berserker enchant on the back bar. And my testing between the Zogvins, between Stormfist, with it getting a buff, overall this was one of the highest output damage builds that I actually had come up with thus far. I'm not by any means the best when it comes to doing the rotation. Normally, like I said, I do it to kind of test and compare different sets. I don't claim to spend a huge amount of time working on rotation, anything like that. It's generally just testing sets to determine, okay, is this a good set for the build? If so, go with it. But if I recall with this setup, I want to say I was in the 37-ish, 37k for DPS with this setup, which I don't do trials, so I don't do the test dummy. That was on the 6 mil, I believe. So very decent damage output for me, who doesn't necessarily have the cleanest rotation. I was still able to get really good numbers out of it, so very happy with it overall. Skill-wise, Okay, so it looks like I did actually make the adjustment. So Templars specifically now, because Biting Jabs has access by default to Major Brutality, anytime you're activating your spammable, I was able to swap out I was using the Werewolf skill at the time. If you watch my other videos, you know I can't stand Hidden Blade. So typically I will run Werewolf, Hircine's Rage, and just move that to the front bar. So this is how I used to have things configured before Major Brutality was available here. So you would get passively Major Brutality from here, and then this used to give you your Major Savagery. Well, they updated it to where this now gives you Brutality and Sorcery instead of Savagery, so I was able to swap out the Werewolf skill in exchange for the Fighters Guild skill, Expert Hunter, which you can see I'm still in the process of getting leveled in order to morph it. I would morph it to Camouflage Hunter. I've never found Evil Hunter to be worth it. Camouflage Hunter has the addition, if you're, especially for 4-man content where you've got someone that's taunting, it's easy to get into a flanking position, so you're able to get that minor berserk for the extra 5% damage. So this is definitely the morph of choice. I just don't have it leveled yet. But this will give you your Major Savagery again, since you lost it here, and now this gives you Brutality by default. This also gives you the benefit, so you get the 5% extra damage from Camo Hunter. It gives you an additional 3% damage because it's a Fighter's Guild ability. That's one of the passives that you get. Increases weapon and spell damage by 3% for each ability slotted from this skill line. So this is definitely more beneficial, and this overall combination works even better now. Deadly Cloak is just good for overall, if you're working through mobs. This will do a nice solid amount of damage. Power of the Light, this is similar to the Magicka morph. Like I said earlier, it's just a great skill overall for single target. It will allow that damage to build up and then explode for a certain amount of damage. Got Resolving Vigor for my heal. Werewolf on the front bar, I wouldn't necessarily say you need to run Werewolf on the front bar. My guess is that I was trying to balance out the sustain, and I happened to have Werewolf available. Maybe I was playing around with Werewolf, but there are any number of things you could run if you're comfortable with your sustain and you're not actively using Werewolf. There's no need to run this here. It looks like I was actually leveling in this instance, because I've got something that's not even morphed here. So it looks like I was in the process of leveling Werewolf. That's probably why that's there. This also does bring you 15% stam recovery, which fully balances with the back bar Repentance, which gives you, I believe it's minor endurance that gives you your 15% stam recovery. So that way your recovery isn't altered when you flip from front bar to back bar. Back bar, Restoring Focus. Again, just like the Magicka build, this is the stamina morph of your rune. So it's going to give you stamina back as well as your Major Resolve. And this is also giving you the heal. It is based on max health, so it's not a huge heal for the DDs, just because their health pool isn't that high. But it's just one more minor bonus that you're going to get from it. Aero Barrage for damage. You can take the other morph if you're not as comfortable bar swapping in a timely manner. This is 10 seconds, the other one lasts for 14. I recommend this if you're good with bar swapping and your rotation is fairly smooth. This is going to get you more damage. Either morph will trigger the Maelstrom Bow, so you're good with either one. That's just solid AoE damage overall. Soul Splitting Trap. This is actually this is a little bit of an oddball choice, but this being a Magicka skill gives me somewhat of a Magicka dump, if you will. It allows me to use my Magicka pool for something that's useful, and this will ultimately do solid damage. It's AoE, so it's going to hit multiple multiple targets in front of you. Sorry, it's not AoE, I believe it's directional, but it'll hit multiple targets for a decent amount of damage, and this helps with the sustain. If you're good with this, with sustain, in this case, I oftentimes will go with Poison Arrow. If you want an interrupt, you can morph it to Venom Arrow. If you want more damage, you can morph it to Poison Injection. Both are decent morphs. The Poison Injection has the built-in execute. Well, it looks like Venom Arrow, that's another change I missed. It looks like that now grants you Major Brutality. I'm surprised they only have it on one morph, but good to see that they added Major Brutality to access to Major Brutality on the bow. So that's a nice change. So if you're doing a bow build, for example, that would actually be very handy. So you could certainly replace this down here. This costs stamina, this costs magicka, so this was purely a choice for me to help with my sustain. Ritual of Retribution, this is actually the same skill that I run on the magicka as well. This is still a useful skill to have. It still offers a cleanse, both for stamina and magicka, and it's doing some damage over time in a large radius. And of course Repentance, good on any build. This is healing for the group, stamina for you, plus the minor fortitude, endurance, and intellect just from having it slotted. Flawless Dawnbreaker, this is going to give you weapon and spell damage for 20 seconds, increased to 300. It's only 112 ultimate, so it's fairly cheap to cast. This between front and back, obviously, unless you're specifically running Werewolf, this is the ultimate that you would want to use. It's a good ultimate, it's cheap to cast, and the damage output is quite solid, plus you're getting the additional 20 seconds of increased weapon and spell damage, so this is a solid ultimate to use. This is also technically its back bar, but this is giving you 3% when you're on the back bar additional weapon and spell damage because it is a Fighter's Guild ability. I'm still in the process of leveling bow. So I'm not sure, this character may have started as a Magplar or a tank, I'm not sure which came first, but clearly the stamina build, I was in the process of still leveling things. This is probably not morphed yet, would be my guess. No, I guess it is morphable. But the bow isn't even fully leveled. Werewolf's still in the process too, so. Okay. CP is so kind of, to a degree, is so individualized that I almost feel bad going over CP because a lot of it is playstyle or personal preference. Here I went with crit because the crit should be fairly decent in this case, so that's going to increase your damage and your healing. AoE, direct damage, and damage over time, these are all beneficial to the sets that you're running. Beyond that, it's where you have spare points and where you want to put them. That gives me the 4 slottables that I need. And like I said, with this setup, the damage output is very solid with this combination. So. Stam recovery is already 1500. Well, it actually is running the Serpent, so I'm probably running the Serpent on this and Lava Foot to further boost that. I don't have any food on right now, but your recovery would be in a very good position. Health is actually at 20 as it is, so decent amount of health, and with the food you're going to be in the 33,000 or so stamina. All points in stamina for attributes. You can tell from here that you don't need any additional health for most content, so. Okay. And to motor through here. So, next one is actually through here. So, next one, oops, excuse me. Sorry about that. Audio started kicking in the background. The next one is going to be tank. There's just a slight variation on this. The tank build on this, I originally put together as a werewolf tank. me just equip this one and then we can... I wanted to try something new, and given the sets that this is running, Werewolf actually works very, very well with this setup. So, Leeching as the base set, this is always going to be great for survivability. I love Leeching as a base set for tanking. And then the secondary set I decided to go with is Tormentor. I've run this on a couple other builds, but not too often for tanks. But for this one, I wanted to try a couple different things. The Tormentor set, specifically when you deal direct damage with a charge, leap, teleport, or pull ability, you're gaining the additional physical resistance and you're taunting the enemies. The reason that this works so well for Werewolf as well as for Templar, you can actually activate this in either human or werewolf form, is both the Templar's charge ability as well as the Werewolf's leap ability are AoE. Depending on, you have to take the right morph for the Werewolf. I'll show you that in a second. But they're both AoE, so the effects that this have when you land and you hit a target, it's actually affecting all targets in the area. So what this does is effectively give you an AoE taunt, which is something that doesn't exist in the game. So this set alone is bringing additional functionality that many people have actually asked for in the game for quite some time. So it's a unique set, drops in Banished Shells 1 and 2. It's not something I've run too often before, but I decided to try it this time because I wanted to combine it with both in human and werewolf form just to see what I could do with it. And it's a ton of fun being able to jump in, leap in on a group, and have the entire group immediately be aggroed on you as a tank, because it's great utility for the group. Oftentimes, as long as you can stay ahead of the group, it doesn't even require chaining. Typically, you'll have to pull mobs in, because if you can leap in first and they're already in a cluster, you'll immediately taunt all of them. So they'll focus on you as the tank. So Leeching, in this particular case, I've got a Pauldron of the Tormentor, and then this is just a trainee piece. So you see I'm not wearing a monster helm in this case, and the reason for that is I wanted to incorporate a mythic item, specifically the Shapeshifter's Chain. Bloodthirsty, that was the trait I was trying to think of on the previous builds. This has been around for a bit. I try to incorporate mythics into builds when I can. There are a number of the mythics that have come out that I haven't found good use for, but as I was putting this build together and looking at this, I thought this might be a fun one to incorporate into the build. So that's the main reason why I don't have a monster helm here, because I knew I would need the front bar, back bar is the same, so this is not a split bar setup. I'm running Leeching on the front and the back, so I needed the slots available in order to incorporate the mythic, and since I only had one slot available after that, I just put a piece of trainee in. So I just went with a sturdy helm of the trainee. So this is reducing the cost of transformation abilities by 15%. While transformed, you're gaining more health, stamina, and magicka. So as a tank in werewolf form, this is further enhancing my resource pools, and it gives me the ability to, in the event that I lose form, I can get back into werewolf form that much more quickly. We'll get into a little more of the details once I get to the werewolf skills specifically and how it's set up there. But this particular one is set up as a werewolf tank, the idea being I want to run the people that I run most commonly with when I'm going through dungeons oftentimes will just do fun runs through dungeons, and one of those type of runs is werewolf runs, where they all have werewolf builds. So I thought it would be a lot of fun to be able to come in as a werewolf tank that's able to actually taunt and keep werewolf form, And so you just got a whole group of werewolves storming through a dungeon. It's a lot of fun. So this fits into that. So it's Tormentor and Leeching, and then Shapeshifter's Chain with a 1 piece of trainee. Front and back are both sword and board, so this is primarily a stamina focused tanking build. And that kind of makes sense because it's a werewolf as well. So you're going to need and want more stamina for the werewolf side of it. And I kept the defending and reinforced. This is, again, it's an easy thing to do. I know some people want to transmute these to something different. You're more than welcome. I tend to hold on to my transmutation stones. I'm a little more reserved with applying them, and in this case, this is only enhancing my defense by giving me more resistance between the reinforced and the defending. So that was a good setup for me. And these are, you'll notice here that I'm running Grievous Leeching Ward on both bars. Just a quick tip for anybody that's wanting to do this. There are a few unique, there are multiple unique items, uniquely named items in the game. There have been, it's kind of a legacy thing because a lot of it was with the initial release of the game where there were a lot of custom named items, and there still are. But one of the things with some of the unique items, one of the limitations that they had in the game from a programming standpoint is you couldn't equip more than one. Most of those, I believe, have been fixed. Grievous Leeching Ward is one of the ones that still remains where you can only have one of these on your person at a time. It's kind of a dumb limitation. Apparently that's just how they coded it initially, and so if you have one of these even on your inventory, if it's equipped or unequipped, it doesn't make a difference. You can't pull another one out of the bank. It will not let you. It'll pop up with an error saying you can only have one equipped at a time, etc., etc. But I discovered a trick, not hacking, discovered a trick that would actually allow you to equip the same shield, because this shield is actually the quest reward that you get for completing Imperial City Prison the first time on any given character. If you complete the quest and turn in, this is the reward that they give you. So it's an extremely easy shield to get. You can even get this on normal. It doesn't make a difference. You just go through and complete the quest the first time, but you'll only get it the first time. So you need at least 2 characters to do this, but once you have at least 2 characters, you can go through, complete the quest on one character, get the shield, put it into your bank, pick that shield up out of the bank on your second character that has not completed the quest yet, have it in their inventory, and then run that second character through and have them complete the quest. And that's the only way that I found, and at that point it will allow you to accept the quest reward, which is a second copy of the same shield. So this was before, it was either before transmutation or it was before they added in the ability to gain transmutation stones more effectively. Before that, the only thing that you could do if you wanted to run Leeching on front and back was you had to just randomly pick up a shield of Leeching, a generic shield of Leeching, which wasn't always the easiest thing to do. So doing it this way, this was a guaranteed, I can get 2 of the same shield. You just have to do it in that order. Like I said, have one character go get the shield, put it in the bank, the other character pulls that shield out, and then goes and runs the quest, which will allow them to then have 2 in their inventory, and you can equip them both at that point. So just a small little thing. The easy fix obviously would then have the devs go through and set this to where you could equip more than one, but it's a unique item, so I guess I kind of understand. So that's the werewolf setup. Let's go through the skills real quick. From a tanking perspective, so we've got Restoring Focus on the front bar in this particular instance. The heal, you'll notice on this is better. I don't even think I do have food on. Or no, I don't have food on, sorry. I generally tank on her, so I'm going to actually eat the food so you have a better idea. So you're gaining a little over 3,000 health per second using the rune, which is a very nice bonus now that we have as Templars for tanking. This is also giving you your major resolve, and you're getting stamina back, so it's helping with the sustain. And that actually still works even when you're blocking. Your recovery goes to 0 when you block. You see it drop down there. But if you've got a rune down, that's actually giving you stamina back. Even though you're blocking, it's still going to... Your stamina recovery goes to 0, but you're still actually gaining stamina back. So it's a nice bonus, specifically for tanking or anybody that wants to block. Explosive charge for this particular setup, if you're running Tormentor, this is definitely a skill you want to run on your bar. This is for human form, Templar tanking with Tormentor. This is a great combination skill. It's Magicka, which is something that as a stamina focused tank, you're going to have that pool to use. So this is a good way of utilizing that pool. It's giving you a charge, so you've got a gap close. This particular morph is interrupting anyone who's casting, setting them off balance, and stunning them for 3 seconds. So this is actually something that you'll often find yourself needing to do for some of the dungeon bosses, the mechanics, where you have someone that moves off from the fight and is doing something that needs to be interrupted quickly. And so not only does this give you a gap closer, when it hits, it's going to AoE taunt everything in the area, thanks to Tormentor, but it's also going to stun them and cause them to stop casting or doing whatever it is that they're doing. So this is a I would say for this build, this is an absolute necessary skill to have on your bar, and totally worth running. So Pierce Armor, this is obviously your minor and major breach, and your taunt. The shield defensive stances, I like running this just because it's giving you the reduced cost for your blocking, as well as the amount of damage you can block. This can be used as a shield in the event that you find yourself needing some additional protection. It can be used as a shield as well. Silver Leash is here for those occasional times when you don't taunt everybody in a group or they're not together. This will allow you to pull mobs in. I highly recommend if you're tanking. From both a tanking perspective, it's very satisfying to be able to pull mobs in to help the group, and from a DPS standpoint, I generally really like it when tanks pull the mobs into the AoE, because it helps clear through content more quickly. So this is a good skill to use. Templars don't have anything built in that can really do this effectively, so Silver Leash is from the Fighters Guild skill line, the very first one here, and you morph it to the Silver Leash, which then allows you to pull mobs in. Obviously Werewolf, for this particular build, gotta have Werewolf, so we've got that on our front bar. That's giving you 15% stam recovery, which helps to balance out on your back bar. We're gonna run Repentance, just like we did on the other builds, so we've got the same recovery on both bars. The morph that you want for tanking when it comes to Werewolf is definitely Pack Leader. Berserker is designed for a damage build. Not to say that you couldn't run that, but you're going to be missing out on some very useful benefits that you're getting from Pack Leader. So the stam recovery is the same for both, but Pack Leader gives the group minor courage. So they're getting a weapon and spell damage increase of 215, which is very nice. It also gives you 2 Direwolves, which help you, based on the passives of Werewolf, that will help you maintain werewolf form for a much longer time period. Plus they're doing damage and helping to aggro mobs and whatnot too, so I can just step through this while I'm here, I guess. So Brutal Pounce is definitely the morph that you want. Brutal Pounce is going to be the one that actually, when you do pounce, it affects multiple enemies in the area, versus the other one that I believe increases your duration. Feral Pounce, there's a lot of here. Yeah, so the Brutal Pounce is doing bleed damage to them and to other nearby enemies, versus Feral Pounce is just the single target that you're hitting. So that you definitely want Brutal Pounce. That's what's going to give you that AoE taunt in werewolf form, because it's affecting multiple enemies when you leap. I went with Hircine's Fortitude. You can go with Rage if you're going for definitely Rage if you're going for a damage werewolf build, or you're going for kind of a tankier, a hybrid between tank and damage. Hircine's Rage is a nice option because you gain that major berserk. But in my case, I went with Fortitude because the heal is stronger, which is a nice thing to have for a tank, and you're gaining some additional health and stam recovery. Deafening Roar, this is another one that it's kind of a no-brainer. If you're tanking, you want to apply the Major Breach and the Minor Maim. Both are extremely useful for the group. So this is effectively, you're gaining an AoE taunt, and then you're gaining Major Breach through this. So it's kind of like replacing your Pierce Armor in werewolf form. You don't get the Minor Breach, but you do get Minor Maim, so it's a nice balance. And of course you're gaining passive abilities off of this as well. It's not, the passive abilities aren't quite as useful as Major Brutality and Sorcery. Not a huge deal as a tank, you're not doing a lot of damage. Same with Savagery. The additional crit, I guess, could potentially help with your healing, but that's, you know, the passive abilities that you're gaining off of this aren't necessarily a huge boon when you're tanking. Howl of Despair, this is actually I would recommend this morph over the other one, again, just because you're not in it for the damage, and the Feeding Frenzy, the Empower light attack damage, if you've got a good group, will actually help to boost the overall damage of the group, versus the other one doesn't really do a whole lot for you as a tank or for the team. And then Claws of Life, Anguish is more of a PvP type skill with the Major Defile, so we don't really need that. Claws of Life are definitely, it's just going to be a heal over time, which is really nice. You're going to hit enemies in a cone, you're going to do some damage, even in tank form, and then you're going to get healed for that, for the damage done. So this is just a nice benefit to have. And of course, take all your passives. These are only going to increase your capabilities as a tank. This is going to increase your duration, and when you have the Direwolves up, you'll find that the duration that you're able to stay in form is quite long. And if you're like me and you happen to be running dungeons with other werewolves, people in werewolf form, you can pretty much clear the entire dungeon without ever having to worry about losing form. Major Resolve is a good one. Again, that's just there passively, but you definitely want to take this. This will give you your Major Resolve in werewolf form. And when you deal damage, this is going to increase your duration. That's good. Movement speed, increases stamina from your heavy attacks. This is definitely useful. As a tank, you will still need to block. Looks a little funny in werewolf form, but you still will be blocking for sure. So having this particular passive will give you a considerable amount of stamina back when you heavy attack in werewolf form, which is definitely useful. Okay, so that covers werewolf. Back bar. Some of these are kind of optional as depending on what you want to run or what your group may require. I tend to run Sanguine Altar. It's a nice skill to have for both you and the group. You can morph it to the other morph. I have to look here. This comes from, sorry, it's under Undaunted. I took this, it's kind of your preference. This one costs less health. It lasts a little bit longer. It doesn't heal, the synergy doesn't heal for quite as much. So if you're all for the group, I would actually take the other morph, the Overflowing Altar, because the synergy heal that they're going to get is going to be more. But to each their own. The This one will last a little bit longer and actually costs a little bit less, so if you don't want to eat into your health, maybe you're a lower health tank or something to that effect, then I would recommend taking Sanguine. The health steal is definitely nice though. It's a nice option for the group. Turn Evil is the CC. This comes from the Fighters Guild skill line. This is just in human form, obviously. This just gives you the ability to CC enemies, which is something that you, again, are kind of lacking in the Templar kit. So this at least gives you some mechanism to do that. So I took the Inner Rage. So this is primarily a stamina setup for the tank. Most of the stuff is stamina. This is Magicka. So which morph you take on this is completely up to you, I guess. I like Inner Rage in this particular instance because it balances out. I do Gap Close, which is Magicka. But generally speaking, I got more than enough left for an Inner Rage if I need to do range taunt. I do, no matter where you're tanking or what the content is, I definitely recommend having, if you're running Sword and Board, having Pierce Armor as well as Inner Rage. You definitely want a range taunt because there's just some mechanics that you're not going to be able to get to where you need to get to in time, and you're going to need to be able to taunt the bad guys. So Inner Rage is Inner Rage or Inner Beast, either morph, but you're going to want something in terms of a range taunt on your bar. Echoing Vigor is it's a heal. I took the morph that actually heals you and your group, so it's an AoE heal. This is just more auxiliary healing for both me and the group, so it's just another benefit for the group. Repentance, again, will heal me as well as stamina, and then it heals the group, as well as offering the minor fortitude, endurance, and intellect. This is a great skill, free to use. There's always bodies, so you're always going to be able to benefit from this. And it looks like I'm using Solar Disturbance. The morphs, excuse me, the ultimates on this, obviously if you're running a Werewolf tank, you have to have Werewolf. The secondary morph is kind of up to you. If you want to spend the bulk of your time in Werewolf, then it really doesn't matter because you're going to be in Werewolf form. If you're not going to do that, or you want to do kind of a half and half, Solar Disturbance is a good option to take if you want to use something from your kit. Radial Sweep is more, you can use it, but it's more kind of damage focused. Rite of Passage is, again, group utility. If you want to offer some healing for the group, emergency healing, I guess you could potentially do that. Shield Wall, if you happen to think that you're going to be in really hard content where you're going to need this, maybe it's a pickup group, this is a nice option. It's fairly cheap to run, and it's definitely going to save your bacon if you're in a tight spot. So that's an option. This setup is Sword and Board on both bars, so that's the only one you can use from here. I'm just looking through the other options here. I guess you could run Flawless. It's kind of up in the air. This build is primarily about Werewolf, tanking in Werewolf form, so I didn't worry about it. Warhorn, I guess, yeah. That would probably be my choice. You can see I'm still Assault level 3, so I haven't even unlocked this, but yeah, actually, rather than running Solar Disturbance, I would probably run Warhorn. That's always going to be a good option for groups. If you... yeah, I would probably just run Warhorn. I just haven't unlocked it, so that's probably why I'm running Solar Disturbance. Tanking setup for CP, this is pretty much the same as most of my tanks. They don't vary a whole lot. I've got Duelist Rebuff, Enduring Resolve, Unassailable. If I need some additional resistance, sometimes I will take this, but for the most part, I don't. Definitely get it unlocked to where you can put 20 points into here. That's just 10% reduction. It's just passively there all the time. And then direct damage reduction here from Ironclad. So between Ironclad and these 3, that's going to reduce a lot of your incoming damage, and then after that, it's kind of up to your personal preference where you put your points. Over here, it's a tank. I like the health benefit that I get from this. This gives you additional resistances. I took that in this particular instance because I'm not a Nord or a Breton, so I wanted a little more resistance. This is going to reduce the cost of all of your skills, not just the active skills, but dodge, rolling, blocking, etc. by 25% when you're under the effect of a status effect, which even as a tank or DD, you'll likely be under a lot. And then over here I take Bracing Anchor because the snare that you get from this is not that bad, and the overall mitigation that you get for blocking is quite good. So for this particular setup, because I am as a werewolf, you do have a heal in werewolf form that you potentially are going to need to use. It is a solid heal, but it is a Magicka based heal. The rest of these are stamina. So I mean, for tanking in general, Sugar Skulls is a really good option, but specifically for a werewolf tank, this is going to boost your Magicka pool by a good chunk, so that gives you that much more that you can draw from, both in human form for your gap closer or inner rage, as well as werewolf form for your heal. So I definitely recommend this. This stat density wise, this has probably the best combination of stats for food in the game. And you can pick this up on Guild Traders. It's fairly cheap to buy, or you can craft it yourself, I guess, if you have the recipe and you have the materials, but I usually just buy it off of the Guild Trader. Serpent, in this particular case, I think is a good choice. Recovery is almost always going to be either Atronac or Stamina. Recovery with the Serpent is what I will take for tanking, just for the additional recovery. I can never really get enough resources, so... I think that covers everything. It's CP, food, yeah, I think that covers everything. So the other variation that I have on this, that was the primary build. There were times when I actually found I was having more fun in human form, so what I did is I actually did a slight variation. I call this the Tremor Tank, where I keep the werewolf purely for the recovery. So looking through here, all the skills are exactly the same. I'm still wearing the same basic 2 sets, so I've still got Leeching, and I'm still running Tormentor, and I'm using Explosive Charge as the gap close, so I get the AoE taunt out of it. But I essentially am not running Werewolf on this particular setup. This is purely for human form, and because of that, I dropped the Shapeshifter's Chain off, as well as the Trainee piece, and replaced them with Tremor Scale as a monster set. And so this is more of a stamina focused tanking setup, similar to the DK, where a lot of the focus was Magicka. It's not just the tank's focus, but it's also on helping Magicka DPS when they come in with Encratis Behemoth. Whereas this one, thematically, it was more stamina focused, so I went with Tremor Scale, which of course is going to boost the physical damage of your group versus the flame damage of the group. So it's kind of the counter to that Magicka build. We're running Stam Recovery on all of the jewelry, and of course Healthy, just because health as a tank is always going to be good. All points into health for the attributes as well. On both of these setups, that's consistent as well. I guess I didn't actually cover it before, but the enchants are all health on the body pieces, and I, generally speaking, here we have a reinforced piece, but normally it's for tanks. I'll run sturdy on most of the pieces, if not all of the pieces. Occasionally I'll do reinforced on the chest piece, but other than that, everything else is sturdy, because I like the block cost reduction. I don't do block cost reduction on the jewelry. I do recovery, whatever it may be, stamina or mag, depending on the build. In this case, it's stamina. And then reinforced and health enchants on the shields. Crusher enchant on the back and flame damage on the front. I have no idea why that's flame damage now that I'm looking at this. It's interesting. I don't know how that even got on there. That wasn't on there by default. Clearly I added that, but I'm not sure why that was flame damage. I don't know that I'd necessarily recommend flame damage. Because you're running sword and board on both bars, you're not getting a two-piece enchant like you would with a destruction staff. So this crusher is half of what it could be. I get that, but this is, at least it's offering some resistance reduction. Flame damage on the front is a very odd choice. I would probably do like something that does physical damage with stamina return, something to that effect. You could reduce the target's weapon damage or something to that effect. So there are better enchants to run on this front board, or front sword rather. So I think that's about it. Covered 4 builds, is basically just kind of a variation on the tank build. I like both of these. It's fun to run this in human form as well as werewolf. Either one is a great setup and a lot of fun to play, so I highly recommend, if you haven't gotten your hands on Tormentor yet and haven't tried running this, definitely recommend it. Keep in mind that the AoE taunt in human form there's a limited number of skills out there that can do this. You can technically, the two-handed skill, the charge, if you use Stampede, this will also give you a gap close that has an AoE effect. So if you wanted to run Stampede with Tormentor, that's another set skill combination that works if you want AoE taunt. But there's only certain skills in the game that will actually enable that AoE taunting capability. And the Templar is one of those that has one built in with explosive charge where you're hitting multiple targets. So lots and lots of fun to play. Soul of Dusk. Lord Warden is trapped in my shield. That's what this unique shield does, by the way, in case anybody hasn't picked it up by now, that when you complete the quest, you're essentially trapping, I believe, you're trapping Lord Warden, or the essence of Lord Warden, something to that effect, in this shield. And so when you pull out your weapons, on occasion, he will talk to you from the shield and generally give you a hard time for trapping him. It's kind of fun. Okay, I'm going to wrap it here. That covers it for all the Templar builds. Thanks.